Have your attention. Starting the meeting. Good evening, everybody. This is a meeting of the Board of Selectmen. To my far right is James Labrie. My close right is John Martin. Myself, Charlie Konecki. This is a joint meeting with the Personnel Board relative to policies of the town. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The purpose of this meeting is solely to review sick time issues relative to the Personnel Board. So we're not going to be taking public comments or anything at this point. Mr. Labrie, you seem to have done the most field work, so if you'd like to begin.
Sure. Good evening. After the last joint meeting we had with the Personnel Policy and Procedures Board, it came up to where maybe we could purchase some disability insurance. So I contacted Heather. I got the census from the town, forwarded it to the insurance company, and I have a quote here that I passed out to everybody earlier, and describing the benefit. Basically, what I wanted to do to compare apples for apples, currently they're on a 26-week disability, so I went with a 26-week disability. And we have two different numbers here. One of them is the 26 weeks. If it's an accident, there's one day grace before the policy would start, and then if it's an illness, there's an 8-day grace before the policy would start, and it's a 26-week payout. And the other plan that they quoted, okay, it's 60%. It's a 60% of their pay. And I also attached a form in here about taxes, pre-tax and post-tax on the premium, which affects the benefit as well. So if they pay the tax on the premium, the benefit will be tax-free. If they don't pay the tax on the premium, and they use before tax dollars, then when they get the benefit, it will be taxed. And there's one of the forms in here that talk about that. The other plan they did is 60% with 15-day grace for accident and a 15-day grace for illness and a 26-week max payout. So the two premiums we have here. The first premium for the one day, 8-day, 26 weeks for the town census that I received is $10,446. The 15-day grace, both for the illness and the accident with the 26 payout, is $8,577. So I'd open up any questions, or where do you want to go from here?
Just clarify, how many staff members or employees does that include, Heather?
37.
37. And this number will work its way up or down depending on what we have. Okay.
You want to sit up? You want to sit up here? There's two seats open. If you want to sit up here, Art, it doesn't bother us. No, we won't have to. Don't tell me you're shy. That coaxed them over, didn't it?
Art Lawrence, Chairman of the Personnel Board. I think I worked out that this was about 16%. I know 20% was of a concern because of people having less than 30 hours. So I worked, I think it's 16.2%. So we're well within that. The couple questions, and I think they're answered. Yeah.
I don't mean to contradict you, but among the 37 employees listed are people who belong to unions, and we cannot just unilaterally assume that they're going to participate in this program. So that might throw off the computation as to whether or not we've met the 20% threshold for having people working 30 hours or more.
can I ask a question?
I think, well, one second. I think we got to clear up for everybody at home that we're talking about the amount of employees on the policy. You cannot have more than 20% of them working less than 30 hours
That's correct.
a week. So that's what we're talking about.
Right.
On our CBAs, Heather, as far as sick time goes, is it exclusive to that CBA, or does it relate back to whatever the personnel policy is?
So all three of the collective bargaining agreements already have language in them for this 26 weeks plan.
Okay.
So the language is already there. It says nothing in the language that would require it to be a self-funded project. I would say as long as we strictly adhere to the language that's already there, we should for the most part be okay. I mean, obviously, we'd want to sit down with the collective bargaining groups and just discuss with them what we're doing. But I think at the end of the day, as Jim has explained it in the past, I think he'll go into more detail what that 60% really means when it's pre-taxed, that it's actually a better deal than what we're currently paying at the 75%, is my understanding, Jim. Is that correct? You're giving me a look.
Yeah, no, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's, yeah, as long as they pay the tax on the premium, the benefit is then tax-free.
And do we
May
know
I-
what the tax on the premium is?
Whatever your normal income is. It's claimed as income.
Part of your wage.
Yeah,
Do we-
it could
we
be
don't have a range or
30%.
percentage?
What's the average person, 35%?
25, 30% tax range, that's what you'd be
Of,
taxing.
of a premium that might be $12. I mean, it's pretty small. They don't have to. They can actually not, they can leave it and use, and not pay the tax on the premium, but when they get the benefit, then they're going to be taxed at that point.
So in order for them to do a pre-tax, they have to constantly pay tax on the premium?
Correct, that is
So like,
correct.
let's hypothetically say the policy starts on January 1st. That would mean as an employee that I would need to start paying tax on the premium on January 1st, or when the policy first went into effect, in order for me to get any benefit at the pre-taxed rate.
I understand that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, when the policy goes into effect, they pay the tax on the premium.
So you're paying tax on $12.
Correct, so it might be a few dollars. I mean, it's pretty,
Yeah, I
it's
mean-
pretty small. Like I said, they go either way. It's their choice. They have to elect which direction they go, and I would recommend they go that way. It makes a big difference in the end, when you really need it.
I have two more points here. Has the Highway Department contract been ratified? Yes. Because I would argue that the language in that contract does not cover this. If I were an arbitrator, I would rule that it either lacks specificity, so little specificity was unenforceable, or the alternative is that it constitutes a contract, and, you know, it's a matter of contract interpretation. I don't think it meets the test, frankly. And, yeah, I mean, I just really don't. And also, it's my understanding that even selecting the insurance carrier is a mandatory subject to bargaining. So even if there's language referring to this in some collective bargaining agreement, there's no guarantee that the collective bargaining representative is going to agree for this insurance carrier. So I think that these are things we need to tidy up when we're dealing with the bargaining units and working with the insurance carrier, because it's not a slam dunk in my mind.
Nothing in the world is a slam dunk as far as I can tell, but if you think about this meeting is to try to determine direction for the
Right.
town.
And I can
Not
tell you
to
this,
try- Not to try to tidy everything up in one meeting.
no, but if we're talking about what we're going to be doing, my personal belief is I think it's great that we offer the short-term disability insurance. I think it's going to be an additional cost to the town, and I think it's a cost that's warranted. You know, if it's a good way to try to keep our employees. So I'm all in favor of it. But I'm not sure that we have enough information here to make any determination as to, number one, whether or not 20% of the people who are eligible for coverage here are working 30 or more hours a week. And that is dependent upon who is going to be included. And so we really don't know at this point. If everybody here is working 30 hours or less, what's that going to do to the rates? That's all I'm asking. Yeah.
And
And, you know,
see if it's worth moving forward with or not.
just because I'm in a bad mood and our air conditioner broke today, you know, I think that this is part of it, and I'm not considering myself an expert in this, but I think that so often when these kinds of issues come up in town, we really don't have enough expert input. And so I would urge us to move carefully when we make this decision, even though I'm fully in favor of offering this to the employees if it can be afforded.
Thanks.
Okay, can I bring up an expert? Because I'm not, but Josie is
Bring the expert to...
a former HR director and has been through this before, and she has some definite comments she'd like to make.
Which I'm going to modify from what I had told you just a little bit, but Joanne Alderman, AKA Josie, 48 High Street. With some history or background with these and policies, frankly, I think this is very generous. I would be interested to know what types of insurance and for how long coverage lasts in other towns and communities. I think that would be a fair thing to look at. And as Jim had mentioned, and I have no clue how many people work less than 30 hours that would not be included in this, and I do think that's something we at least need to know about. If we move in this direction, which frankly I think is a pretty good idea, this would mean, in my opinion, changing the sick time policy that we had talked about. For one thing, you know, why would we offer the short-term disability and then also have this massive sick bank potential, which I think would only jeopardize, you know, the...
It's either one or the other. It's not...
Yeah.
There's no way it could be both,
Okay.
in my mind.
Okay. In my mind, too. And unless somebody has questions, that's all I have at the moment.
Comments?
I thought you were going to,
Pardon?
I thought you were going to kind of refer to what you were saying there earlier about unions and whether it was part of the CBA or not, give an opinion on that. But
Oh, I never worked with unions, so I can't address that issue.
yeah, which is good.
Complimentary
Those are questions we need to pursue.
bits of expertise here.
Thanks.
Well,
One more, just one more comment. I know whenever we went out to look at benefits of any type of insurance, we always looked at least 3 different companies.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
This is just trying to get some information.
Preliminary.
Yeah, really,
Just something to make a decision whether we go this way or we don't. If this was $50,000, I don't think we'd be going that
Yeah,
direction.
that short conversation and,
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
but it averages $5 to $6 a week if you use the 37 numbers, which makes, at least in my mind, something we want to go forward and look at, answer the questions that, you know, Jim brought up.
Just,
Did I say something, Jim, that made you want to come back up?
no. I just wanted to clarify a point, that this bid, as I understand it, is strictly non-contributory. In other words, the employees would not pay. Josie mentioned that at your place, the employees did pay?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if we'd want to look into that also, if it would be contributory or partially contributory or non-contributory.
I think that's part of the process we want to evaluate.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I guess the reason we had it set up that way was to give the employee the best benefit. I didn't, certainly wasn't aware, we did not offer that the way Jim has done it at his organization. So if there's a means of having it be theoretically non-contributory on the part of the employee, but still being able to allow them the non-tax benefit, that's very nice. I just wouldn't know how to go about doing that.
Wasn't that one of the options?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when they actually collect it, they get taxed then?
We would have to.
Right.
It would be taxed, or if, like I said, if they pay tax at the premium, then it's tax-free on the benefit.
Right, yeah. We were talking about, we're only going to have one or the other. At least in my mind, at a high level, it may be a combination of, because you may want to have a sick leave bank with X amount of hours, not necessarily up here. And then, when this kicks in, you give the people enough time to collect sick time. So if you go 15 and 15 or 30 and 30, then they have enough sick time to kick into that, which will lower our costs tremendously, too.
Yeah, I'd like to just, Josie brought up a good point. I mean, what are the other towns doing? What are the communities doing for, is it 26 weeks? Is it 10 weeks?
Yeah.
The only reason I just went out there, I just tried to keep it the same as where we're coming from. We were 26 weeks. That's why I went with 26 weeks. But if we reduce that or increase it, whatever we do, I want just to compare apples to apples to see where it would cost. The cost be to limit the exposure to the town, because I think self-insured, the town is currently self-insured, and that's a huge, huge unknown. We've been lucky in the past. I mean, it's been around 17-ish thousand and down to about 1,000 at some point. But it could be bad. There's a lot of exposure. And the other thing that they do here is whatever company we go with, they manage it as well. So we don't have to accept or deny somebody. They submit the paperwork, and the company maintains that. I think that's important.
That's very important.
So in a, go ahead, I saw you jump, so.
Well, I'll just let you know how we used to do it.
Now, just without naming names, can you give us kind of the type of company you worked for and what industry they were in and all that?
Healthcare,
Healthcare, okay.
okay, and we had over 600 employees.
Okay, thanks.
No unions.
Okay.
So we offered employees the opportunity to purchase the short-term disability, which was inexpensive, $6 a pay period or something, you know, it was not very expensive. They got the 60% non-taxed benefit. We had a longer elimination period, 30 days. Frankly, 15 would be very nice. But the short-term disability lasted for 90 days. That policy was 90-day policy. The company purchased long-term disability, which kicked in, had the 90-day elimination period. So, you know, because frankly, 26 weeks, that's pretty long-term. I don't know of any companies that really offered short-term at that length of time. So if someone was out for short-term and then they would get into long-term, they're not paying the premium because the company's paying that. I think there was a waiver of premium in there somewhere. I'm not quite sure how that all worked. But, you know, after a certain point in time that the employee was out, the company no longer had to keep their, you know, and I'm assuming that they're in long-term disability at this point, no longer had to hold their position. So I think that's something that should be at least explored. Not sure what town and people would want to do, but that's another way of going anyway.
Just a comment, I had a similar where I worked, well, numerous places where I worked. We paid for the short term, we had the long term. And the long-term lasts forever. Actually, I still have a guy that has been on long-term disability for almost 30 years. So, and he still gets his money every month. So, and the plan was, as Josie mentioned, the short-term was minuscule as far as cost. I don't know, again, I don't know what it cost the company because it was a benefit, obviously.
Yeah, as far as I know, the long-term will go to the age 65, and then it goes to Social Security after that, I believe. I think that's what happens.
Yep.
So if, as a layperson not really involved in insurance, what you're basically saying as a group, that we're looking to add a $12,000 a year policy being maxed to basically insure the town so that if their employees become ill or injured, they have a income source rather than the town providing that income source. So in essence, we are actually insuring ourselves.
I think we're self-insuring now, and now we're going to outsource it to a third-party administrator.
But we minimize our liability by taking this policy out.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah, like any other insurance,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we have roughly 37 employees, and last meeting, Jim got up and gave an example of maybe a car full of 6 going to a Red Sox game, getting in an accident, and it was like closer to $100,000. Yeah.
But that's adding in the replacements.
Right, so even at half that, 80, 85, so $1,000 it's an unknown, you never know, and that's only 6 people out of 30, I mean.
So we're really insuring the town when we do this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're protecting it, it's a known thing, and then they're also managing it for that price as well.
Yeah, and it allows us to take the money that the employee would normally get paid, bring somebody else in here, keep the town running until they're able to come back.
So I guess the next question is how many town employees we have? What kind of feedback would we get from the union? What I would suggest is that a motion's put together that we table this for the next selectmen's meeting, and at the next selectmen's meeting, we vote to put an article on the special town meeting floor for this amount of money. This, I'm only saying 12,000, but that's a whole year. Only so that we can have this ready in October for the voters to decide if this is the direction they want the community to go in. Does that seem logical?
In one sense, yes, just as a placeholder so we can have it at the town meeting, but obviously there's a lot of questions we need to get answered before we want to get up there and say we want to do this, but if we need a placeholder, sure.
Yeah, if we put the placeholder in there, then we'll work towards that.
Yeah.
And maybe we can put a feeler out with the unions, is this something they're interested in, because as negotiations come up, we're going to have to address this at some point, and if we at least have this to offer and maybe the other policy they came up with and work between the two, but,
Yeah, I mean, I agree, talking to the unions, but also we need a legal opinion too, because we may have 2 different opinions in this,
yeah.
which is off the case. Now, you say $12,000 just as a high number?
I'll just use that high number for a whole year, because the high number Jim gave was 10,400 and something.
Right.
So let's say 12 just as a number,
Yeah.
because as you know, when we start negotiating, we're going to have different people, and we're going to have different contracts.
Yep.
And I'm talking that 12 as being next year's budget, not this year's budget. This is probably going to fall into somewhere around 6 to 8.
Yeah. Once Heather gets more quotes, it may even go down.
Just a point, and I know she'll kill me for saying this, but you have that town administrator list of whatever you send out to the world, listserv. I mean, I wonder if we could get some inputs from towns about this size and what they're doing in regard to this, and maybe even get some quotes or something of how they handle this issue.
Just in answer to Josie's inquiry earlier, she had asked a question and Art had answered it a few weeks ago. The question was, I wonder if any other municipalities have this policy, and Art had already answered based on his research, couldn't find any. But one thing to keep in mind is we already have this policy, and it's, again, as was mentioned by Jim, the unions already have this policy in their written pieces. And to negotiate with 3 unions and get everyone to agree to drop this policy altogether is kind of far-fetched at the moment. But what isn't far-fetched is to say, okay, so we're doing the exact same thing we've always done. You actually are even eligible to get more funding because you can do a pre-tax piece. And at the end of the day, you know, it supports the idea of continuing with this notion. I think it's, you know, seems to be very important to the morale to have this here. And at the same time, and John's already mentioned it as well, it totally reduces the liability we currently have because, as Jim said, that six-person car wreck is completely potentially catastrophic for the town, but we would be able to, you know, bounce back. There are plenty of questions that are still on the table, and I know Jim's been working with the rep to answer them. You know, is this a one-time 26-week thing? What's the lifespan on this? If I go out 26 weeks from now, can I ever be eligible for 26 weeks again, or is it once in my lifetime, once in my employment history, once in my what?
It's per event. So if you break your right leg, you're out for 26 weeks. You come back to work, you break your left leg, 26 more weeks.
Gee, that's not the way I interpret that.
That's, I clarified that with the rep. It's per event. If, once you max out the 26 weeks for a particular event, if you break your right leg and you're on 26 weeks, at the end of 26 weeks, they're all done, that claim is complete.
Even if you were going, yeah.
Right. And then I also asked the question, I know it's a lot, not possible, but you break your right leg, 4 weeks into it, you break your left leg. Does it start over? And she said, yes, another 26 weeks.
Just for the left leg.
Yeah, just, again, my background is with the National Labor Relations Board that had jurisdiction over private enterprises and the post office, but not governmental municipalities. But the rule, the law is, at least in the private sector, is that if there's a term of an extant contract that may not be changed without the agreement of both parties. So if there's already something embodied and agreed to in a collective bargaining agreement, and we want to change it, the union must agree to it. If it's not specified in a contract, then we can make a proposal and bargain the impasse. All right, but that gets messy. I mean, it's better to reach agreement. But the point is that if it is contained in collective bargaining agreements, this current policy of us funding it, I agree with Heather. I don't think it's going to change during the life of the contract. When the contract expires, we could revisit the issue. So I think it's important that we talk to the unions first, find out, you know, how amenable they are to exploring this issue. And this way, when you go to the insurance company, we can say, well, we know we've got 25 employees, you know, or 10 employees, whatever it might be. But we can get a better grip on getting an accurate estimate.
And then we have the other part to this. Until we go to town meeting and get approval, how far along do we go in the conversation with the unions and everybody else? Because we need to make sure the town's on board with this.
Oh, sure. But I mean, you know, they say buying the pig in the poke. You know,
Yeah.
if you go to a town meeting, we should be able to give the town as much information as we
I
can.
would rather go
And
to
I
town.
wouldn't make a proposal, detailed proposal at a town meeting until I knew the unions were on board.
Yeah, I would rather go to the town meeting with some kind of idea of what the unions were thinking,
Sure.
for sure. But the other option, and I don't know if it's an option, but as we read the union contract, if all it says is that we have to supply 26 weeks sick leave at 60%, how we do it may not be an issue with the union. We may have full reign over that, because as long as we're not decreasing what we offer them, again, I don't know what it says in the contract, so we got to look at all that stuff.
If I had a contract that was very ambiguous, I think I'd want to nail it down. If the terms were ambiguous, because
Don't disagree.
an ambiguous term could mean that the union agreed to what we have currently,
But again,
and you can't change that.
but again, if we didn't change anything we were giving them, and it was just where we're getting it from, I don't think they would have an issue with saying, gee, that's fine, it's better for us, actually.
Really, because it almost gets into bargaining strategy, I shouldn't mention it, go into great detail here. But let me respectfully suggest to you that the union is and it's their absolute right, and I'm pro-union, so I'm not, but they have the right to negotiate the details.
Sure.
And that would include eligibility periods, insurance carrier, what do I have to do to qualify for coverage, which currently we don't have any requirements. I'm sick. We have a procedure, and I think that procedure is in place, but technically speaking, it's not really written out anywhere.
So I think we're at the same thing. We got to look at what we have now and discuss it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree. But I think it's a good idea to investigate it more, for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to know how the unions feel about it.
So do you want to move the table this to the next selectmen's meeting? For the place marker or for the next town meeting?
Do we need a motion for that, Heather? No? Okay, so let's just table it till next meeting.
Which, you just need to tell me if I'm amending the 30th meeting, which is next week, so that's the next meeting, or if you really mean the next actual regular meeting, which is the 6th.
I'm thinking the 6th.
See, when I sit here, I think it's a regular meeting.
So the 6th, is that
Yeah.
what the board wants?
Because you need some time to get some of this information from other towns.
Well, it's Thursday at 6:31, so,
Set, go.
Yeah, I agree with it. Yeah, the 6th is fine with me.
Fine with me?
Okay. Then I'm going to call this meeting adjourned unless there's something else.
Can we be kind of explicit what we're looking for on the 6th, so that,
Well, my understanding is we're going to do a query of all communities in the Commonwealth through her listserv to determine what other programs other communities are doing. We're going to try to nail down how many actual employees that are non-unions qualify for this insurance. And we are going to maybe do a polite cursor to the unions and see if we get any off-the-record comments as to what they think.
off the record? Okay.
I would hold on that last piece with that deals with the unions. The select board is meeting on Tuesday night. One of the items is executive session for one of the current union contracts that is not ratified at this moment. So I would say those conversations should wait until we finish that conversation before we
Okay,
engage in the next.
Point taken.
Makes sense.
Very good. So the 6th,
Yeah.
that's it.
6th.
It's got some good potential.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Need a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. You know, I sent it back to you saying you didn't do it. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.